So we're finishing up talking about advertising. We're looking at some ads. Again, what are the two things that make an ad great? What makes an ad great?
Produce a selling message.
That's the second. What's the first? Engage the mind of the consumer, produce a selling message. Now when we talk about selling, what are we thinking about? Does it just necessarily have to be products? No. It can also be ideas and things like that. So I think we watched or talked about at least some of the anti-smoking commercials. And one of the things that we found out through market research and a book called Biology, which I've mentioned before by Martin Lindstrom, they've done some fMRI studies on people watching these ads that are smokers, and the part of the brain that's actually triggered is the pleasure part of the brain. And so it seems to suggest maybe that those ads are not terribly effective, because what is the selling message in those ads that they want to get across? Don't smoke. Now some of you said maybe it is effective because what is it? It's maybe not going to affect those people that are smoking, but it will do what? Yeah, it may encourage people to not smoke. Those metrics are kind of hard to look at. So we'll look at some ads here. This was just an image, it doesn't play, is that right? Okay, so what did you all think? Why did you all think this was a great ad?
Well, we thought it really spoke a lot.
Okay.
Some of the stuff you like have to worry about,
Okay.
and tell maybe why you should buy the product.
How does it spin? How does it? It's just the car seat and the price tag.
Yeah, look at the one.
Look at the what? Okay. All right. So you think that's a great ad? Okay. All right. Coffee and cream tea.
Mosteira, arranje-me outro lugar. Minha senhora, quase que não me está a lutar. Desculpe, eu não vou viajar ao lado negro. Faça qualquer coisa. Eu vou falar com o comandante. O comandante manda dizer que conseguimos arranjar lugar na primeira classe. E pedimos as desculpas. Realmente é inconcebível um passageiro viajar ao lado de uma pessoa tão desprezível. O senhor acompanhe-me, por favor?
What do you all think about that ad? Justice? Why did you all choose that ad?
I think we all decided that it was a rather fitting situation for the Ferguson stuff that's been going on lately in the news.
Okay.
And how well it pertains to favorism and biasing, and how the justice system is kind of skewed in some sense whenever it comes to race.
Okay. Yeah. One of the interesting things, if you go to the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance, for example, you start out and they have two doors. And one says something like prejudice, and the other one says not prejudice. They tell you to choose, and you can't get through the one that says not prejudice. It's because everybody has some prejudice, or at least that's what they imply, right? Do you think that's true, that we still have these artifacts of racism or cultural bias in society today? Okay, it's a powerful message. One of the things that is amazing about your generation is that you're far more tolerant than any other generation that we've ever seen. You just think it's really pretty stupid, which is why I think maybe the gay rights movement has taken off so fast, because your generation just views that as being very, very bigoted and not appropriate. All right. Volkswagen Beetle. Who got this one? Okay. Is this it? Or is this it? Yeah.
any trouble?
I don't want any trouble either. You know you forgot to take your mask off, right?
Okay, what did you all like about that?
Just being a summer car.
Okay, so you think that did deliver a selling message? Okay, you're gonna drive the Beetle up to the ski slopes in Aspen?
Someone might.
Okay, all right.
Yes! Let the holiday season begin.
We'll do our justice.
Hon, I can't even tie my shoes
We'll watch
at
the
this
ad
point.
before it.
Okay, I'll tie your shoes, I'll go get it, and I'm on the road. Finding some gems up here. Who's this little girl?
Stay focused, please.
Bingo! Merry Christmas!
Just bring him downstairs. Come on, it's lovely weather for a sleigh ride together with you. How's it going up there? Do you have enough lights?
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough roof.
You think a little more snow would make it look real?
Okay, so fall blizzard. Hey, don't eat the decorations. You're supposed to be helping.
I am. I'm making a fire.
Well, that might be too close to the tree, huh?
What is that?
It's mistletoe. Deal with it.
Cheating.
Yeah, right.
Hi, did you find everything?
I got enough bread to carb load an elephant. I got some overpriced nuts and some things wrapped in white paper.
And some of the tiny pickles?
Only the tiniest. Come on. Okay.
You guys aren't even gonna give thanks?
Ready?
Right. Oh, it's beautiful. You know what this gets me in the mood for?
Oh, absolutely. I can watch this 1,000 times.
Me too.
Think that delivered a selling message? That was the ad that you wanted? Right, I know, but I was just asking. I said we're not going to skip it since we're being ethical. Remember, I teach ethics.
I hate these cinematic dunks. Yeah, no, I agree. Wait, I'm gonna call you back.
What'd you all like about that one?
I think it really reminds people that the company is still there and it still is not just longer place to buy or something good.
Okay, all right. Some of these ads are longer, the one that was before that was obviously longer. Do you skip through the ads on YouTube? Some of them they won't let you skip through anymore, but they're fairly short. Remember, you have to get that message in a pretty short period of time, even on web pages and things like that, because people will skip past it if they can, if there's any way. So we need to talk about personal selling in chapter 20, sales. When you become an academic, you believe that the entire world can be explained by your discipline. And so I started out in my academic career as a political scientist, and I taught political science for a lot of years here. And of course I thought political science makes the world go round. I used to go around my class in American National Government, and I would ask students, why did you take my class? And inevitably they would say things like, I just don't like government and politics, it's boring. and I only took your class because you're not Dr. Jones, who's boring. And I started to get a complex, and I didn't understand that perspective because, again, I could explain the entire world from the vantage point of my discipline, which is that government makes the world go round, right? There's nothing you can do that doesn't escape the attention of government, right? Everything from how fast you can drive to the qualifications of the person that writes the prescription of your eyeglasses to how deep and in what you will be buried is regulated by the government. The government touches everything, right? Well, when I became a marketer, I started to say things like, marketing makes the world go round. And I have a tendency to think everything is marketing, right? Marketing is the only fully integrated function of the firm, right? So you can explain your entire discipline, the entire world perspective from the perspective of your discipline. And then I became involved in selling, in personal selling in the sales team. And so I'm going to tell you that everything is sales, right? We all sell at some level. If nothing else, then we're going to sell our labor to our employer, right? So you should understand something about sales. And again, for those of you who haven't chosen a major yet and are just doing general business, you might want to think about the sales major, or at least a sales minor, because we have 100% placement in that program. We're one of the few programs that has 100% placement, and our students are making above the median income for the Oklahoma City area. They're making far above that. So you might want to consider sales. And we had a couple of students that came in and talked to you about our professional sales major, right? So everyone sells. Sales happens everywhere. Even if you don't think about it, again, what have you done to market yourself today? You got up, you did some things. You did those because you want to sell yourself, if nothing else, to your friends, right? You want to keep them around. You want them to like you. You're selling yourself. It involves this two-way flow of communication, and we talked about some of the aspects of communication that can be difficult in terms of things like filtering out noise, making sure that your message is received. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about social styles in just a minute. Sales management involves the planning, implementing, and evaluating of an entire sales program. Lots of top positions in companies and CEOs come from sales and marketing. Why is that? Why do they not necessarily come from accounting a lot of the time? Does accounting know how to make money for the firm? What keeps the firm in business? Sales and marketing, right? Sales and marketing keep the company in business. So there are three major roles that salespeople play. And a lot of people tell me, I just don't like sales. I don't want to be a salesperson. But again, you're going to sell something. And you can apply that you can do these roles if you're not a salesperson for the company that you go to work for. Salespeople, though, are a critical link between the firm and the customer. And that's one of the things that marketing seeks to do, is to add value across all aspects of the firm. They are the company's eyes. How so? Yeah, and they're also the ones that are what? Dealing with the external constituencies of the firm on a daily basis, right? Whereas accounting, do they always deal with the external customers of the firm? No, maybe not, right? And then they play a dominant role, of course, in the firm's marketing plan. They add value. There's a saying, one of the top salesmen says, people love to buy, but they don't like to be sold. And one of the things that we have to overcome is this perception, and you all have been to stores. I'm sure you can think of a big store here in the Oklahoma City metro area. I won't call them out by name. Or if you go in there, high-pressure sales tactics, right? Probably think of several car dealers that are like that. And so when we talk about our sales program, we have to convince students that it's not necessarily about that kind of stuff. That does go on, but it's not necessarily about that stuff. It is about building relationships and creating value through those relationships, and that's part of that co-creation, value co-creation process that I've talked so much about. It's also partnerships. And in business-to-business sales, you find this a lot, where you combine and you really do have those co-creation of value to deliver highly specified products and services to your customers in the B2B context and even in the B2C context. There are several types we can classify salespeople as. Basic order takers. You have outside and inside. This doesn't involve a lot of selling. You know, it's generally stuff that is not highly complex. There are a few options, standardized, right? That you don't need a lot of expertise to deal with. Then there's order getting sales, and this involves more complex interaction and technical sales than just order taking. Your text also talks about missionary salespeople. Missionary salespeople are not necessarily ones that actually take orders or do selling, but they are critical to the company. Can you think of an industry that uses missionary salespeople a lot? They don't actually sell actual product, but they do influence and get people to buy product through their activities. How about pharmaceuticals? Pharmaceutical companies hire pharmaceutical reps, right? Who actually buys the product? The patient actually buys the product, right? Do pharmaceutical reps come out and talk to you about their products? No, why not? They go to the doctors, right? Going to you and talking about their products would be what? Maybe construed as the unauthorized practice of medicine, right? So they can't do that, but they talk to people that influence what it is that you're going to be prescribed for certain things, right? We are one of only 2 nations, by the way, that allows direct-to-consumer advertising of pharmaceutical products, of prescription drug products. The other country is New Zealand. Is that a good thing, that we allow direct-to-consumer advertising of pharmaceutical products? Why is it not a good thing? Okay, all right. And our pharmaceutical ads have to tell you about all the potential side effects. If you listen to them, you probably would take some of them. May cause a heart attack, may cause internal bleeding, may cause your head to fall off, right? But we do allow direct-to-consumer advertising of those pharmaceutical products. I think it's both good and bad in that I think that it has educated people about options. And it used to be a time in this country where if you went to a doctor's office, you might not ask for a second opinion because the doctor knows best. We didn't have a lot of advertising of that stuff. And so I think people are more aware in their managed care as a result of pharmaceutical advertising. On the downside, I think it has created a perception that we can fix everything with a pill, right? That we can just run to the doctor and get a pill, and maybe that's not necessarily a good thing. Missionary salespeople, like pharmaceutical reps, go out to doctors' offices. They don't actually sell the product, but they are able to educate doctors and providers of the drug about the products that the pharmaceutical industry is manufacturing. Sales engineers have highly specialized technical knowledge. They're often not involved in the actual sale, but they are part of the process in negotiating. This is one of the things that, and your text talks about sales teams. In the company that I worked with, this was what we used. We used a sales team, and one of those was a sales engineer, because we had to design software for specific school needs out there and to comply with all 50 state standards in the K-12 market. We would actually have people, for example, curriculum specialists that could go and talk to school districts about what the curriculum requirements were of the district, where they were falling down on those curriculum requirements, and then we could integrate that into our product. And so these were really like sales engineers, and then we had a whole sales team. I was part of that team. As the legal officer, I would go out and I would look at the RFPs that school districts put out, and I would make sure that we could comply with the legal aspects of fulfilling the bid. And so we would use a team approach instead of just having one person go out. And those kinds of B2B sales, that's not necessarily uncommon. The selling process begins with prospecting. Now this is the part that most salespeople really have a hard time with and don't like. Why is that? What does prospecting involve? It involves what? Communicating or finding your customer. Who is your customer, right? And that is a lot of work. How are you going to do this in this highly complex world? I told you that we won't have the social media chapter on the 4th exam, but it does provide an excellent opportunity for salespeople to find out all kinds of information in prospecting. If you went back in time before we had all the social media, what did they do? Well, they had to maybe just go through phone books, just do cold calls, door-to-door sales. There were lots of those. There's a brush company called the Fuller Brush Company that actually sold stuff door-to-door. Avon still is a remnant, a product of that. Mary Kay, they went door-to-door and sold stuff. That's a lot of work to find that one person who doesn't slam the door, right? Social media has been able to really impact our ability to find out what people are interested in by the groups that they join and things like that, and the networks that you can create. But it's still a really tough part of sales, going out and finding these people. So a lead is just a name, and you can get that from lots of sources. What's one of the maybe most valuable sources of leads if you're a salesperson? Your customers themselves, right? Asking your customers. And it's amazing how much people like to be asked stuff. Tip O'Neill talks about this in one of his books. He says people like to be asked. He was talking about a campaign in which he was running for re-election. And he went up to a constituent that he was sure, Tip O'Neill used to be the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, that this guy was going to vote for him. And the guy said, well, I'm actually thinking about voting for your opponent this time. And Tip said, don't you remember when I did this, in constituent services for your family? And he's like, yeah. And he said, and don't you remember when I helped you with this? And you called my office? And he said, yeah. And he finally said, well, why aren't you going to vote for me? And he said, you didn't ask me this time. And the other guy did. He'd waited until really late in the campaign. People like to be asked. Ask your customers. It's a good way to build your business, right? A prospect is a customer who wants or needs your product. And a qualified prospect, now this is what you really want to get in prospecting, is one who not only wants and needs your product, but has the ability to buy it and is the decision maker. Now in business-to-business sales, this can be difficult to figure out because in highly complex organizations, we oftentimes find buying centers. Buying centers are highly formalized. At UCO, for example, the buying process, if I need something for my classroom, like a light bulb, and I talked about this, and again, this is how all of this stuff sort of comes back and integrates together. I can't just buy a light bulb for the classroom, can I? I can't just take my UCO purchasing card, I have one, out and buy the light bulb for my classroom. Why not? It's got to go through a process. It's got to go through a bidding process, and there's a buying center where we have professional buyers that get all this stuff, that submit bid or gather bids and then submit them for requests for proposal and stuff like that. And so understanding this in business to business can be really tricky. Who is the actual person who has the ability to make the decision? In the company that I work for, I told you we built learning management systems for K-12 institutions. That's primary and secondary schools, elementary, junior high, and high schools, right? So you've got all of these people that influence and may be part of the buying decision. People like what? Teachers, principals, even students, right? One of the things that we got a lot of people to do is we get them to let us go in and test it with their students and see how their students impacted it. But do students actually buy the product? No. Who buys it? The school district, which means actually who has the formal buying power. It's not even usually the superintendent in a lot of states. It depends on the district and the size of the purchase, but it's actually the school board in many instances has to actually approve the purchases of a large district. And so understanding these complex buying centers can be really, really challenging. Once you've got a qualified prospect, then you're going to start with a pre-approach. You need to learn about that person, gather information about the customer so that you know what it is that they want. Again, how are you going to do this? In an age of social media, it becomes much easier to do because we can do what? You can access it. Just Google the name, right? Look at their Facebook, LinkedIn, all of these types of things, right? Can provide you with information about the customer and their needs and wants and things like that. Then you approach the customer. Gain attention, usually through a wow statement. Mr. Augustine, you work for Vaughn Wow, right? You a salesperson? How do you approach a customer?
Depends.
Okay. What does it depend on?
The customer.
Okay, so you're gathering information from the pre-approach, doing what?
Environmental scanning.
Environmental scanning, you're looking and seeing what they're what?
Wearing.
What they're wearing,
What
what they're looking at, okay? Then how do you approach them? Let's say you've got, what department do you work in?
Ladies' shoes.
Okay? Ladies' shoes. How do you know they're interested? You should make the approach.
Say that again.
How do you know that they're interested? You should make the approach.
Women love shoes. They're there to
Oh
stop.
my God, a stereotype. Men don't like shoes.
No, we
I
do.
love shoes.
But we don't wear them often.
Okay, all right. So how do you approach? So somebody's looking at shoes. What kind of things do you say to make the approach?
Generally, my first approach is not like overwhelming. So just making myself known.
Okay. Just letting them know you're there. If they need help with anything, that's good. You don't want to be too aggressive, right? Again, because people like to buy, but they don't like to what? They don't like to be sold, right? They're naturally skeptical, but people do like to buy. So understanding all those things, looking at that, making that first impression, right? You never get, what's the old adage? You never get another opportunity to what? Make a first impression, right? Which I guess is maybe bad. One of the things that happens, you all just did student evaluations, and one of the things that we know is that student evaluations are correlated with two things. One, the expected grade in class, and two, whether or not students liked you within the first 5 minutes of class. And students overwhelmingly tell me they don't like me within the first 5 minutes of class for some reason. I don't know why that is. But you warmed me, right? Learned to love me. So you never get a second opportunity to make a first impression, so that's important. The presentation. In doing the presentation, you have to be aware of your customer, right? Through all of the stuff that you gather. There are different social styles that people use, and we teach this in personal selling. 3/4 of the people that you come in contact with every single day won't have the same style that you do necessarily. And so understanding that and understanding how to communicate with them is going to be enormously important in getting through that message, right? Encoding that message in the right way so that it gets through the noise and that they can actually hear it. Words are not necessarily the key in communication, right? 7% of what we communicate is based on the words we use, or on the words we use. 38 is on the way we say it, right? Years and years and years ago, when I was the Associate General Counsel, I used to take my roll sheet in to my administrative assistant at the time. Her name was Brandy, and I would say, Brandy, could you enter these into D2L, into the D2L? Well, it wasn't D2L at the time. We had, I think, WebCT at that point in time. Would you enter this into the computer for me? She'd say, she couldn't pronounce my last name, so she called me Dr. Grantley. And she'd say, well, yes, Dr. Grantley, I'd be happy to do that for you. The way I phrase that is as a what? I phrased it as a question. Is it really a question? No, it's really, I mean, if she didn't want to do it, she could go find another job, right? It's not a question, but it's the way you say things, right? It's not the words that you use, it's the way you say it, and 55% are based on what? Non-verbal. Things like body language. That's a huge one, right? So if you see a customer in your store standing like this, what does that tell you? Huh? Run. They're not approachable, right? They don't want to, head down, arms folded, closed off, right? So it's body language, so understanding that. There are different dimensions in the social styles. Assertiveness is one dimension, whether or not you ask or tell. is a dimension. And what these form is a 2x2 matrix. And then responsiveness, whether you are control or emotive. Right? So we get a 2x2 matrix. There are 4 social styles that emerge from this 2x2 matrix. The driver. Drivers tend to be serious, dress formally, have rapid speech, are results-oriented, strongly opinionated, and controlling. They're usually confident and hardworking, direct and to the point. Years ago, again, when I was Associate General Counsel, we had a tenured faculty member who was having a real problem with her dean. And it was because they were talking differently to each other. She was not from Oklahoma. Do you think we are different in Oklahoma than, say, someone from New York City? She was from New York City. And she had gone to school all of her life on the East Coast and had graduated, I believe, from NYU. And so she would walk into an office and she never started with, hello, how are you? It was just, I need da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, bam, and then she'd leave. He had grown up his entire life here in Oklahoma. What do we do in Oklahoma that's maybe different than that? Yeah, you don't walk into somebody's office and say, I need this, 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 and this, and then turn around and leave. You do what? Huh? Yeah. What's it like? How are you going today? How's it going today? How are your kids? What's the family doing? Right? Things like that. She was definitely a driver. And expressive. They're casual, energetic, enthusiastic, talkative. They're generally creative, opinionated, animated, lively. These are sort of the life of the party. The amiable. They're quiet, supportive, friendly. They're generally warm, use a soft voice, but they're cautious in decision making. And finally, you have the analytical. There are a few gestures, very deliberate speech, focused on logic and facts. They're generally quiet, not as emotive, and conservative. So understanding all of these sort of environmental factors and being able to read people will really help. Social styles, and again, personal selling is not just necessarily about selling the product. It's also about communicating and selling yourself. And these kinds of things can help you in that communication process. And if you're interested, I really suggest that you take at least our personal selling class. It's a really good class. If you want to get a minor, it's not that many more classes, and you can add that to any major in the College of Business. So I really encourage you to think about sales. Sales management has become more complex, particularly in the business-to-business world. Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta finish. After you present, go through the presentation, you want to close, right? You should always be closing. Don't overtalk the close. And then finally, because we focus on relationship building, not just transactional sales, although we still see examples of transactional selling. I think I showed you all some examples of that from my fair days, right? That's pure transactional selling. Make the sale, move on to the next customer, right? Because you're at the fair, you're going to be there for how long? 10 days, move on. Now, how many sham wows are they going to buy from you? Probably not a lot. But other than that, we focus on relationship selling, but you also have to have a follow-up. Sales management. Companies are becoming really, really good at sales management and having complex systems that understand the customer and implementing these kinds of customer resource management systems. For example, Hilton has a fabulous one where they know everything about you by these metrics that you give them. What floor you prefer to stay on, whether you primarily travel for business or pleasure. Does that make a difference? What kind of difference can it make if you're traveling for business or pleasure? If you've got family, it'll probably also impact what things that you're going to talk about at the front desk with your clients. Food, amenities, right? Business travelers are probably going to be more interested in things like what at the hotel? Internet, the bar, things like that. Social travelers, vacation travelers are going to be more interested in the pool, other stuff, transportation, things like that. So these systems are really very valuable and help. Sales management also involves, of course, coordinating sales team efforts, managing people. You will find that a lot of salespeople and a lot of my friends who are salesmen actually, they go into management and a lot of times they want to go back to sales. Why do you think that is? They make more money in sales actually than they do in sales management because you generally have a lower margin of commission if you're a sales manager, if you have any at all. And you have a lot less flexibility than you do as a salesperson. So it's one of those careers that I really think you should highly consider if you're at all interested. Let's talk about the exams. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I want you all to do well. We discussed a book in class called Consumer Republic when we talked about retailing. And I talked about this woman's, the book is called The Consumer's Republic, and her argument that consumerism and the consumer movement actually has an impact on our social movement and things like that. We also talked about, this is the second question that relates to that, this movement away from the downtown area and one Supreme Court case in particular that led to the suburbanization of America and the building of things like the shopping mall because people fled out of the downtown districts. As a result of this one case, it was a civil rights case. You should know what that case is. And also the author of The Consumer's Republic. Retailing. What is the value of retail? Four of the largest companies in America are retailers. You should know who they are. Four of the largest companies in America are retailers. 4 of the 30 largest companies are retailers. You should know who those are. And also the overall value that retailing creates, right? A huge portion of our economy is as a result of consumer demand. There are about 5 questions that ask you to be able to identify the utilities. So it will ask you what is, it'll give you an example of something and ask you what the utility is being provided. I'll read the question directly. Wells Fargo, or one of the questions, is one of the largest banks in the United States. It reaches retail customers through 9,000 stores, a worldwide network of 12,000 ATMs, and online banking services. Which utility does Wells Fargo best provide? There was a thing in your book about Walmart. Walmart's sales surpassed the gross domestic product of all but blank number of countries for that year that's mentioned in the text. Walmart's $4 billion, $421 billion in sales surpassed the GDP of all but blank countries for that same year. We can classify retailers, different methods. You should know what those methods are. There are 3 questions that relate to that. As I discussed in class, in my opinion, a great ad does what? Gauge what? Engage the mind of the consumer and deliver a selling message. We talk about marketing the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. In the promotional mix, what things are included? Things like advertising, public relations, direct marketing. The promotional mix can be used to do 3 things. The question asks you, be used to do, it tells you 1, 2, and you should be able to identify the 3rd. We talked about integrated marketing communication. How important integrated marketing communication has become to delivering that consistent message for a company. Talked about communication process. Sender, encoding, things like that. You should know what that is. Should understand channels of communication. Be able to identify examples of those things. The transformation of ideas into, for example, an ad campaign is what? Errors can occur in the communication process when you don't effectively transform your abstract idea into an effective set of symbols. The receiver doesn't get it. Properly transform these sets of symbols. And then feedback can be distorted. There's a question that will give you several examples of potential communication error. Be able to identify that. There are several that ask you about applying the promotional mix in application. There's a question that asks about communicating with your generation in particular. We have an incredibly diverse population in terms of generations, right? And in terms of other factors. Your generation communicates differently sometimes than others. You should know the primary types of product advertising, what the advantages of advertising are, you should know and be able to apply comparative advertising, institutional advertising, your text talks about steps that are taken in developing the advertising program. You should know that. What was the question? In developing an advertising program. You should know about types of appeal. For example, in political marketing, we talk a lot about fear and hope. Fear messages are oftentimes used in political advertising. But they can also be used in other types of advertising. Can you think of an ad that uses fear and hope? How about the help I've fallen and I can't get up? Life alert, yeah. The use of celebrity spokespeople in promotion, you should know about that. The tasks involved, this is in your text, in managing personal selling. The text talks about, this is just straight from the text, approximately what percentage of CEOs have significant sales and marketing experience. The ways in which selling creates customer value. The types and forms of personal selling. Know what a sales engineer is. The stages of selling. Be able to identify what happens at each of those stages. The text has a nice diagram. That's about it. Do you all have any questions? Yes, sir.
What are the exact chapters?
Exact chapters on this. It's going to not encompass social media chapter. Right now. 16 through 20. Yes. I will post the fourth exam as quickly as I can. I plan on posting it on Thursday right after class, so that you will be able to tell whether or not you take one. Bonus, again, the critical thinking projects will go to that percentage, so if you have, like you missed today, you will count for that. The bonus questions for the final and the bonus for the surveys and stuff like that will go towards point totals on the exams. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you can. I'll tell you what, after, I will post a copy of exam 4 on D2L after you take it. How's that? I did not pass it.